This is Unforgettable Learning, where we talk to L&D visionaries, experts and mavericks about performance, creativity and tech. Subscribe to stay in touch. AI is the latest buzzword, yet we also sense this is more pervasive than previous emerging tech trends. We've seen AI touted as the next era of vastly accelerated content creation, enhanced skills diagnostics and recommendations, more accurate access to information at the point of need, and better data analysis and insight. But it can be overwhelming to assess the real value tied into the promise of AI, leaving some of us feeling a bit of intense FOMO or choice paralysis. Here in the second part of our two-part series on emerging tech in learning, we continue our conversation with Egle, Director of Learning Innovation Consultancy at Nodes, to gain some perspective on AI and move from the flurry to the facts. Egle, welcome. Good to see you again.
Hi, Kate. Good to be here.
You're very welcome. It's lovely to have you. And just before we get into AI, can you tell us a bit about your role at an innovation agency? Just tell us a bit about what you do.
So in terms of AI specifically, I would say solve two types of problems. I support organizations on using AI in their learning processes, either actual workflows or part of the learning programs that they're creating. And on the other side of that coin is, of course, supporting L&D in them playing a role in the organization-wide adoption of AI. So we have, on one hand, what's happening with AI and L&D. On the other hand, what do we do? How do we support the rest of the organization as it adopts AI? And outside of that, I've been in the field of emerging technologies for the last, I think, 8 years, working both on the product side and with organizations on implementing these products. So it's actually, it gives me quite an interesting perspective, hopefully, in terms of how AI differs and what's going on here.
Fantastic. Well, you're the perfect person to be talking to about this then. So, there's a lot of noise about AI, and I really would love for you to just cut through some of that for us. And can you tell us a little bit about what you think are the most valuable use cases right now? Because I imagine that this is changing all the time, but the most valuable use cases right now for AI in the workplace.
So there are some of the most accessible use cases and some use cases that require effort. So some of the most accessible use cases are in the learning design field, I would say. And if used well, it can really support your workflow. But the important part here is that I would say you should avoid automating and focus on augmenting your existing workflows, because where it often goes bad is when you try to use AI to automate a certain part of your process away. So, one-click course creation, that sort of thing, create all the content. So this is what gives AI a bad name in the field of content creation and learning design. However, I've seen really interesting uses, specifically, first of all, in brainstorming, which is part of the process which really helps people to start thinking about the design, about the problem that they're trying to solve. And it is important to recognize that we're doing this in a context where often learning designers work either by themselves or in very small teams. And often these teams have different skill sets. So you don't have a team of, say, 10 learning designers. It's usually a few. So having a little buddy to talk things through and to spar, this is something that a lot of LDs have found as very useful in their work. So that's one good use case. Another one is creating a high-level outline for whatever program, whatnot you're creating, as well as helping you think of various activities that you may introduce. And it applies both to digital learning and to creating a workshop, something in person, live, face-to-face. And this is something that has, if used at very specific points in the process, this has helped people to think much more much in a much more divergent way. It helps you come up with more things, come up with more ideas, and eventually end up stitching them together in a hopefully a more effective program. Although admittedly, we still don't have a consensus on whether that is objectively a better design, but it has certainly helped people. And I think if you're augmenting, that's a good one. Now, in my personal opinion, and this is where we go into what do we do outside of the low-hanging fruit, which is learning design. We have used content historically in a way where we try to do a lot with it, because if you think about the scope of what L&D might do, on one hand, you have performance support. On the other hand of the spectrum, you have upskilling. And what we have historically tried to do is that we would try to throw content at everything. So if we want to support people's performance, we're going to create microlearning. So we're just gonna create content, but in shorter bursts, so that people can
still
view
learn.
it. Yeah,
yeah.
Supposedly at the point of need. So that's one application historically, and then on the other hand of it, okay, so there's upskilling. We need to support people in developing their skills, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna create a branching scenario, so that you can have an uncomfortable conversation, but you do it with an avatar and 4 answer options. And in both of these cases, again, I don't want to knock these approaches, because before AI, we didn't really have much to choose from. We didn't have the kind of technology that could actually do exactly what we needed to do. But with AI, we can finally take content out of these extremes, leave content in the middle, leave content to for example, create instructions, descriptions, some foundational knowledge, things like that. And then for performance support, actually plug in AI into your organization's knowledge base so that people can get actual performance support at the point of need. And on the upskilling side, instead of creating these almost like static scenarios that really, in my opinion, often it's not just knowing what to say. It is the confidence that's the actual skill, and it is actual practicing of that skill that matters. And now with AI, we can do that. We can give people this practice sandbox where they can do deliberate practice and gain the confidence and actually have that difficult conversation. And they do it in a more personalized way, or a very personalized way, because they use their own voice, they use their own accent, language, speaking pattern, and they get feedback exactly on what they said, instead of prepared answer options. So I think that is revolutionary for our field.
I was going to say, as someone who's written their fair hand of branching scenarios in the most ridiculous of ways, when all of this started coming down, I couldn't help but think about the potential for personalization that AI can do. And when I think of sort of the realm of human versus AI, my mind instantly moves towards, well, anything that's beyond the scale and capability of a human is what AI should do. And if I think of branching scenarios, and I'm sure some people can relate to, you have an organization of 10,000 people, but you have one branching scenario to take you through a tough feedback conversation or something like that. It's not reflective of individual learning needs. It's not reflective of where they are in a particular moment, experience, where they are in their career. But there's something incredible at the potential of AI to understand who you are and what you need and give you that in the flash of a second in a way that a branching scenario couldn't. And to your point, we didn't have access to those tools. And so, it's not to flock on that necessarily, but the idea of how we can do personalization at that level is incredibly exciting for how we can think about how we learn.
Exactly. Yeah.
The piece that you mentioned that I continue to kind of wrestle with, I'm sure there are a lot of people listening right now that are curious and interested about AI and are looking for their intro point. And there's this realm that you instantly come up on where you've got all of these open source tools, which are exciting and fun to play with. But the second you cross into your organization, it's a different game in terms of privacy, in terms of ethics, in terms of IP. What's your recommendation for those that are curious and interested, but also know that you're dealing with very sensitive information at the same time once you're in your organization? And you said the phrase, plug into your organization's database, into their knowledge base. From your viewpoint, do you feel like the entry point is at minimum, make sure that your organization's got its own AI LLM setup instance, so that you're not bound to trying to do these things in just sort of the open world of ChatGPT?
Yeah. So when it comes to these point of need performance support AI applications, there's a reason why that's lagging behind, and that's exactly why, Josh. It is because there's obviously the InfoSec problem. Privacy, security, what kind of information AI has access to, how do we make sure that it is not leaving the company? In some regards, that is solvable, and in some regards, is still a question whether that is 100% safe, because AI would require access to some really proprietary information to actually be useful. And on the other hand, here we also have the technical challenge of how to make sure that what AI produces as an answer is accurate. Because if we are asking AI, if AI is becoming it sort of helps you navigate the workplace, meaning procedures, what do I do, who do I call, how do I escalate, I'm in the situation. If we're saying that, okay, we're gonna replace compliance, some of the compliance training, which people just cannot cram and remember, with point of need support, we need to make sure that AI is accurate. And right now, that is not a solved problem to a degree that enterprise organizations needed to be solved to deploy at scale. So these are definitely big considerations. In terms of taking the first steps, and again, talking about this whole performance support, personalization, skills intelligence, all of these more advanced uses, this is not the first step for most organizations. When Donald Taylor and we were doing our report about how was actually happening with AI and L&D, we actually found it really difficult to find organizations that have moved beyond content creation and learning design. There is just a big chasm between these use cases and everything else. So if the listeners are now considering, okay, so I really want to start doing something with AI, this is not where you begin. You begin with three things. One, clarifying your policies and understanding what is actually permitted in your organization. A lot of the time, we talk about that, okay, so to do this thing, you need to have this policy. But the reality is that it's not L&D that often creates these policies. It's actually something that is somewhere in the organization, and you need to understand what it is. And it's not necessarily up to L&D to create a framework for how you're using AI in the organization. So that's first. Let's be realistic. But it is important to clarify what these policies are, and it is important to communicate them as well, because unlike a lot of compliance, which is done pretty much to tick off a box, when it comes to how you're permitted and not permitted to use AI, this is something that people are going to be using every day. So I think there has to be a very clear communication campaign. What you do not do with AI. So for example, you do not put a whole spreadsheet with people's information without anonymizing it. So things like that, like very everyday things. So I think that's the first thing that people need to do. And the other two things is take stock of what kind of technology you already have available to your team and your organization, because it may not just be ChatGPT. There might be other technologies that do other AI technologies that can also be helpful for you, that you already are paying subscription fees for. because a lot of other tech is adding AI components. And the third thing is to understand what skills and experiments, what skills people have already in your team and what experiments they have already done. Because the thing is, like Ethan Mollick, I think it was him who said it, that your employees are your R&D, and it's free R&D in most cases. People have already done a lot of their own tinkering, so it's a very rare L&D team that would start from scratch. A lot of people have already done quite a lot by themselves.
That's really fascinating. I think all of those things are really important. And I want to just come back to this. If we are at this adoption level and maturity level of sort of content, and you mentioned earlier using, I love this term, sparring, and sort of thinking of AI as a creative partner, because I've certainly done that and use it in that way. What tools are you seeing people adopting fairly easily and readily?
ChatGPT.
And any others? I mean, are people using like Copilot from Microsoft, and are they just sort of like, because I summarize a lot of meetings using different tools now. That means that I don't have to do it, and that's great. And are you seeing these sort of being integrated? But I know that's a different question, because I'm sort of talking more generally.
But actually have an answer to that, which is a lot of what has been so far used in L&D has been used under the table, meaning that if I go...
It's experiments.
Yes, but it's not, people don't, most people don't use corporate ChatGPT accounts. They don't use corporate accounts for any of the other tools, because the company does not provide them. It is quite an expensive decision, $20 per head, and you have 10,000 people. That's quite an investment. So it's quite consistent, both, for example, for myself, from my experience, when I speak somewhere and there's 100 people in the room, and I ask how many of you have tried using ChatGPT at work in L&D, and probably 80% raise their hands. When I ask how many of you have used your official account, or have some sort of official account, I think it's the last time I heard a few months ago, it was like 20-30%, I would say, of the hands stayed up. So that's the reality, and that means that the most widely used tools are free ChatGPT instances. So yeah, that's where we are.
And what's your take on that in terms of? And I know that you have a view on sort of just the ed tech market in general on this, but do you feel that there's curiosity and energy around AI, but not necessarily investment sponsorship towards AI, or are we still discovering?
There are a few things going on here. At the individual level, I think there's a lot of excitement. I think we have moved on, and this is anecdotal, not a survey. I feel that we have moved on from this state of fear. Oh my God, what's going on? What does that mean for me? Towards, okay, this is exciting. I can see possibilities here. So that's good. There is, in terms of getting access to technology, to actually getting literal accounts that I can use. Now GPT-4o, which is thankfully free, but we've had that for a week now. And one of the things that has happened with people using free accounts, which is ChatGPT 3.5, which was like significantly worse than the paid version up to 1 week ago, is that it obviously is still generative AI, still can provide a wow moment, but it is not the kind of, it doesn't have the ability to get you an answer, get you an output that actually makes you feel like, oh my God, this is going to change how I work. Especially because when people first start using generative AI, they don't quite know how to use it, and they ask a very big question, like, solve this whole problem for me, and it produces a very lackluster generic answer. And then, and this is something that we noticed in our survey, which was a bit over half a year ago, which was that a double-digit percentage of people in L&D, they got disillusioned with AI and they stopped using it because they thought that it just takes me too much effort to QA what AI is saying. It takes me too much effort. It just cannot write for me. It cannot solve problems for me. Whatever output it produces, I don't trust it. So what's the point? So we are in the situation where on one hand, there is excitement. On the other hand, there is disillusionment, which is, to your point, Josh, partly, I think, brought on by the fact that people just didn't have the most up-to-date, powerful tools to actually play around. And the final part of this is that for you to actually get access to these tools, you need to put together a business case, because it gets very expensive very fast. Like, for example, co-pilots. Kate, you asked about co-pilots. They are not being rolled out and made accessible to the entire population of employees. They're rolled out, a few hundred employees out of thousands that get access, and then you see if the investment is worth it. So without L&D being able to put together a business case, they cannot get the resource, they cannot get the actual money invested into creating these more, I guess, effective case studies for themselves with AI. Yeah, and just to continue that thought, on the flip side of it, again, in our report, when we were scouring the industry for our case studies, the case studies that came up, and they were the ones that were like, oh my God, you're actually way ahead of the industry. They were the ones where L&D had made a business case and said that we are going to deliver these kinds of results if you give us the mandate.
Wow. So you need a business case, obviously. I'm really curious that you did this report perhaps half a year ago. Do you plan to follow up on it?
I mean, we did one in November and then another one in April. So I'm taking a bit of a break, to be honest.
Taking a break for now. Okay.
It's been a month.
Well, I'm excited to know what you think the future will look like. And do you have a kind of forecast? I mean, you've given an indication with regards to sort of performance and upskilling being the direction of travel. Beyond that, do you have any other thoughts on where AI is going to make an impact?
Yeah, well, my policy is not to make forecasts on the record with AI.
Well, we can just dub it out if you like.
No, but
we'll stop recording now then.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I think that with AI and L&D, there is no one future, I think, because the impact depends on how AI ends up being used in L&D in general, like mostly like en masse. So we might end up using it to create more generic content. So that means that potentially the impact of us having this technology is going to be quite limited and ultimately arguably negative. We're going to have more generic, lower quality content, and we're going to have to spend even more money buying tools to help us sort this out. And then on the other hand, you can have more sophisticated uses that L&D takes up, and that can change how we develop skills and how we support performance. And we may end up adopting all of them or some of them, because there are some of the use cases that, Kate, you mentioned in the beginning. We have skills intelligence, we have data analysis, we have personalization, we have just a different way of looking into what skills mean for the company, because we can target them. We can now support the business with this technology. Specifically here, I'm talking about the skills, like this general skills management family of technologies, where instead of guessing what the business might need and waiting for them to ask us to do something and to deliver some training, we can actually look at what the business is trying to achieve and do our part to help the business be agile, meaning that if the business needs these skills, we can anticipate that and we can do a very targeted intervention to make sure that people have those skills to execute the business strategy. So that's hopefully where we'll be going, but we'll see.
Thank you for that answer. And I mean, one thing I'm kind of always aware of is the grey matter that's between our ears. And I love all this talk about, new skills and upskilling and things and AI playing a role in that. And yet we're still the human being in the middle that has to kind of learn and change and adopt. And are we overwhelmed? Are we change fatigued? Are we kind of, where are you seeing people's responsiveness and upskilling really working either as a result of AI? Maybe it's better with AI, maybe it's more absorbable or practicable, like you've said. I mean, here we are stuck in the middle. What do we do about that?
Well, I mean, there are two conversations. There's one conversation about AI skills, and there's the conversation about all the skills we're going to need to actually exist alongside AI.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, yeah,
no
these are...
pressure. No pressure.
Yeah, I do think I just the other day I was reading something about how when, on one hand, when people work with AI on very high stakes problems, they seem not to trust AI. So there's one sort of group of researchers that are doing research into that area, and then on the other hand, we have a case which just read the other day where if you have very good AI, people become lazy and they stop. It's much like with self-driving cars, you just stop looking at the road. So it is very interesting what's going to happen with the skills, because the thing is that ultimately, it's actually, you've opened a can of worms here, Kate.
Good.
Because ultimately, we have always had this understanding of what skills are going to be needed. Okay, so there is this, the market is going that way, we're going to need those skills. But now with AI, there's a different, I guess, a different way of looking at skills. Like what is the value of skills? Because another piece of research, was it Microsoft Workplace Index, I think, that, or maybe not, like one of the big reports, they posted a stat that more hiring managers are interested in hiring someone who has lower skills but higher skills in AI in their job, rather than someone who has more skills doing the job. So what is the value of a skill now? So in that regard, and how we are going to be interacting with AI.
And then it also goes to sort of a common theme of companies posting less entry-level jobs because there's less time for upskilling and bringing new, part of it being the emergence of AI and what skills. It's a question of not only what skills do we need in the future, but dividing those skills up between what are skills that humans need to know versus what skills an organization needs to succeed and what can be fulfilled with technology or not. So
yeah, and all of this is happening in the context of there being a full generation, meaning us in the workplace for the last 10 years, that have, I would say, quite a lot of foundational knowledge to do our jobs. So we use AI in a different way. But now in the next 10 years, there may be, so we can use AI in a way that supports our work because our foundational knowledge enables us to interact with AI in a different way. However, if you do not get the opportunities to build that foundational knowledge, then what does that mean for your interaction with AI and the trust you place in it?
So rich.
Now we're playing some 4D chess here of prognosticating.
Well, and also I've probably referred to this before, but I heard Ray Kurzweil kind of speak recently and say, very, very calmly and sort of under the radar, once we have AI in place in the everyday, skills and knowledge become, meaningless and irrelevant. And I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. This upends our entire economic model. And what are we going to do? Which, people are frightened about that, but it was a very real thing. And so then the question became, well, what will we do? And he said, well, we'll all develop our interests. And I thought, I don't know if I have anything that interesting to develop to be worthwhile as a human being once all of the knowledge but is taken up. But it does raise a really interesting question, doesn't it? Where if your, say, manager has been there for 15 years and you've only just come in, but actually because of AI, we are in one regard democratized in terms of knowledge. It raises a really good point. Why would I pay this person more money when I could have this, why would I have either of you when I could just use the tools? Like how many, and I do think that it is really fascinating. Of course, we will need to confront this probably in the next 15 years, I think.
Well, that's someone else's problem.
Do you think?
I'll be busy pursuing my interest, Kate. I don't know about you.
What are you going to be, Josh? Like, is it going to be like a literature thing? You're going to become an artist?
I'm thinking like gardening. Something
Nice.
totally, yeah. Something that I plan when I retire to actually do. That might be
feels
something
good.
that
And
I'm
useful,
forced
right?
into retirement. Yeah.
You can grow food. That's useful. I might charm snakes. That might be something I could try. I'll just try everything. What would you do, Egle?
I mean, it's a world of possibilities here.
I know. Isn't it fun? Gosh, now we can't wait for AI to get on with its job of taking the skills.
Get on with it, GPT.
Yeah. Look, we always end our sessions with one final question, and this has been absolutely fascinating. I really appreciate you sharing so generously. We'd love to keep talking to you about this, but I have to ask you the final inaugural question that everybody gets asked on our podcast, which is, what does unforgettable learning mean to you?
It's meaning that learning that leaves a mark, that you remember. And I know this is literally saying the same thing as in the title of Unforgettable Learning. But when I think about the learning that has been unforgettable for me, it was, touching something really deep that made me reflect on how I see the world. So.
Wow, brilliant. I love that. And was it an e-learning course, just out of interest?
It was not, Kate.
You won't be the first person who's admitted that candidly. Fantastic. I've really, really enjoyed speaking to you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And Josh, do you have any final questions for Egle?
I couldn't help but just see the dip in inflection on how you felt in answering that question. I think the brevity of that answer was more than enough for me to kind of reflect on. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. And we will look forward to seeing you again. And once more, thanks so much for sharing all your energy and insight and knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode. Subscribe to stay up to date with leading lights from L&D and leave us a review to let us know what you think.